Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Have I got some news for you? Because the last week meeting for the GRVA actually approved the DCAS Phase 3. This was told to me by somebody who was actually in the know, because we don't have a full written agreement on that yet. That takes a couple more weeks before that approval actually gets published officially. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, first of all, let's see how complicated things can get. So the GRVA is actually fed by the ADAS task force, but on the other hand, the GRVA is also part of the WP29 and the UNECE. I know, it can get complicated, but what we need to know is that there are several new things that have been discussed and several things that were already in the phase 2. So I'm going to go over the most important parts that we already have covered in one bit, but in the new one there are a couple of new things that are really exciting news. So let's dive into it. The first thing is a general condition, kind of, and says, well, when the maneuvers are initiated by the system shall be designed to follow national traffic rules. So if the system initiates, traffic rules need to be followed, of course. When the driver initiates, it is the driver's responsibility to actually follow the traffic rules, which is what level 2 is all about. They also say that compliance with traffic rules might not be fully achievable, but it is the driver's responsibility to take over at any given time to make sure that the system is complying with the regulations. Over-reliance is also a big part where they have concerns. So the DCAS shall aim to prevent reasonably foreseeable risks of drivers' misuse and abuse. If we get the system approved, once we do, please do not do what I see in a lot of videos from the US, where people start making coffee in their car or they start cooking dinner, stuff like that. Please don't do that. We have fought very long and hard for this to become a reality. There are many petitions that were drafted and were successful, actually, but it is a very long, hard fight that we are finally coming to an end. So please take care of us as Europeans, stick together. Well, others in the UNECE countries as well, but let's stick together and make sure we use the system appropriately. End of rant. Now let's get back into the document. So the driver monitoring system that is mandatory in the car will be designed to avoid drivers undertaking activities other than driving. So no climbing in the back seats, no playing cards, no cooking dinner, none of that. Now what else is part of the driver monitoring system that comes later on in the actual requirements is that an initiated maneuver, system initiated maneuver, shall not be initiated while the assessment of driver disengagement is still pending. So while the system is checking, are you paying attention, yes or no, the system cannot do any maneuver. However, they thought about the emergency situations, of course, so in case there is a lane ending and you need to merge, or in case there is a potential risk of a collision, then the car can actually take action to make sure that you prevent that accident or you drive off a cliff at that point. Of course, the system needs to take care of that as well. Again, it needs to improve the safety of your driving. Now, it also includes regulations or mentions of driver training. Again, it mentions that driver training needs to happen, but it doesn't mention how it needs to happen. So here it says it needs to require appropriate understanding by the driver and the performance capabilities of DCAS available on the vehicle. So the driver needs to know what the system is, what it can do, and what it cannot do to avoid that over-reliance that we have. So there is this necessity to ensure that the driver maintains specific or sufficient knowledge on the appropriate use of DCAS. That also means for me that the driver training is going to be a little bit more extensive than what we have right now. If I were to implement it, I would say, let's do a video first, then do a quiz, and if the quiz is successful, then you have proof that the driver actually has understood how the system works, what it is, and what it isn't. That for me is sufficient proof, and I would say it's a good form of e-learning or training that can be done on the car's screen with touch quizzes, basically. And yeah, for me, that would be a good point to have and a good thing to have. It also mentions that if you get a strike, then as soon as you stop the vehicle, you will be prompted again to read the material, to review the material, to make sure that, hey, you actually didn't know what you were supposed to do. You were over-relying on the system. You did not pay attention. So now you have to read the instructions. Again, RTFM. What it needs to cover is quite extensive, but the most important part, again, point A, reminder of the driver's responsibilities and appropriate use of the system. That is for me the most important one. Don't over-rely on it. And then again, how does it exactly work? What is the human-machine interface like? What will you see on screen? What are the different beeps? All that kind of stuff. And again, as I mentioned before, it all comes down to the same thing, RTFM. Know what the system is and know especially what it isn't. Let's get on. Hands-on requests. So the hands-on request is what we have right now with about 15-second interval, is when you don't have your hands on the steering wheel and the car is showing you the little icon with the hands needing to be on the steering wheel. And as soon as you do that, it goes away. If you don't do it, starts escalating. And if you don't pay attention long enough, then it will give you a strike. Now we go down from 50 seconds to 15 seconds to 5 seconds. But as long as you're visually engaged, it can be extended by another 5 seconds. So we go down from 15 to 10 seconds, which is okay for me, because this is going to apply mostly in city driving. And again, if you read the bottom paragraph, then it says at speeds above 10 kilometers an hour, in non-highway environments, it can be with the driving hands near the steering wheel. Otherwise, with all the maneuvers, you would just break everything there. Now, what does it mean to have your hands near the steering wheel? Will it be like we see in the FSD test videos where the driver is constantly hovering around the steering wheel like this, which is not really relaxing, or really not relaxing actually? Or can it be enough to put your hands on the lap and then be near the steering wheel and be ready to take over like that, kind of in the lotus position? I hope that is the case. But again, the regulation doesn't say the definition of near. So it's up to Tesla to say, well, we can do it like this, and for us it's safe enough. RDW, which does the homologation anyway, then needs to approve it as well. Now, whilst withholding a hands-on request, so hands-free driving, right? The system needs to take into account that the driver has a reaction time in response to a DCA. DCA stands for a direct control alert. That's the whole beeping, take over immediately. And that is never less than 1 second. So the driver needs to have some good reflexes to do that within 1 second. And that means you need to be paying attention at all times. Again, it comes down to the same thing over and over again. Now, while it performs system-initiated maneuver, the required time will be no less, or will never be assumed to be less than 3 seconds. So if you're driving, initiated, does a direct control alert, needs to take over. But if it's doing a maneuver at that point, then it is 3 seconds, because you need to assess what the maneuver is doing probably, and it takes a little bit more time to assess that, which is great, and 3 seconds is more than enough time to assess the situation and take over when it actually starts beeping at you. Now it can only be done on a highway and up to 130 kilometers an hour. Now this is fine for me. I mean, if you look at Europe in general, I'm not so familiar with other UNECE country road regulations, but in Europe, most countries have a 120 or 130 kilometer an hour speed limit. There are a few that are going to 150. I think Poland is going to 150 kilometers an hour, and the Autobahn, of course, is unrestricted, but also only on certain sections. About 60% of the Autobahn is still unrestricted, but again, it's not because it is unrestricted that you can drive unrestricted, because traffic is getting more and more busy in Germany as well. So that is definitely part of the equation. So 130 kilometers an hour is perfectly fine for me. Maybe 150 would be better for better driving on the Autobahn, like it used to be with autopilot in the old days, but that has gone down to 140. Now it's 130, but again, hands off, which is a much more relaxing experience as well. And you can still take over and drive manually if you really want to gun it on the Autobahn. Withholding HR on a road by design is equipped with physical separation that divides the traffic moving in opposite directions. So on big roads with a divider between the directions, but that's an important one, where pedestrians and cyclists are not prohibited. So a big road with a general speed limit of at least 60 kilometers an hour, which is outside of city centers in our case. But it's a big road, and usually there will be a separate divider for cyclists as well, but it can happen that the cyclist is on the road and it is still allowed to do that. But again, it's on big roads, non-highways, so the speeds are between 60 and probably 90 kilometers an hour, maybe 100 in Germany, but that's about it. Which I think is still awesome that they allow that, because it is allowed that the cyclists are on that road while you're driving past them at 100 kilometers an hour. Again, usually in a separate bike lane. But yeah, we will see what that means in terms of road classifications, because it also mentions that if you have roads where there are intersections, there it is not allowed anymore to do that, and it's not allowed to do lane changes and stuff like that. So it is all going to depend on road classifications. EOR, eyes on request, is you have to pay visual attention. So at 130 kilometers an hour, the beep is going to come, or the warning is going to come at 3.5 seconds. 10 to 60 kilometers an hour, it will be 5 seconds. In between, it's going to vary depending on the speed that you are doing. And that is of course a slower time or a lesser time when you're doing faster speeds, because you're covering a lot more distance with those speeds, which is only normal that they have that variation in there. 5 seconds is, even at 60 kilometers an hour, is actually quite a long time to not be paying attention while you should be paying attention. So yeah, it's I agree with this, at least in the supervised version, of course. Now for the lateral g-forces, that was already into effect, but let me repeat this a little bit again, is that the feature may be permitted to induce higher lateral acceleration values than 3 meters per second squared, or 0.3 Gs roughly, and it is not to be sustained. So it can be for short periods. So if you're driving into a corner and it's not following along and it's trying to go over the line because of the 0.3 Gs maximum lateral acceleration, it can jerk you into it, have a small break, and then go at slower speeds, so the lateral g-force is reduced. So that is allowed now as well, while it was not allowed on autopilot. Virtual rescue lanes. Now this is a concept that is quite specific to Europe, but right now about 9 or 10 countries already mandate you actually having to create a virtual rescue lane when there is a traffic jam or traffic jam-like situations. And I came across this image that actually uses a hand as guidance. So it's always here that the crossing is going to be. So the leftmost lane goes to the left. If you have two lanes, other lane goes to the right. If you have two lanes, leftmost lane goes to the left, rightmost lane, the two lanes go to the right. If you have 3 lanes or 4 lanes, then the 3 lanes go to the right. It's always here between the leftmost lane and the lane next to it that it actually has to create that virtual rescue lane for emergency vehicles to reach the situation faster, to resolve it faster as well. So I've seen in a couple of images. Now it was this trick that I found, and I found it really handy. See what I did there? Now let's get back to it. So here you see it again, and the vehicle can just pass just like it used to. Now the system shall only leave its current lane of travel to form an access corridor when this is required and allowed according to national traffic rules. There is no set speed limit at which you have to start forming an access corridor. I wonder how manufacturers, not just Tesla, will actually implement this. What I see in reality is that usually around 50 to 40 kilometers an hour, cars start actually moving to the sides to create that corridor. Maybe somebody from Germany can actually tell me if there is like a set speed limit there to start doing that. Please mention that in the comments if you do know. And yeah, I would love to know if there are other countries maybe where there is an actual set speed limit, or whether it's just guessing the situation or assessing the situation and doing it according to what you think is the right speed to start forming that corridor. Now when we talk about system-initiated maneuvers, the system shall be designed to ensure that the driver has sufficient time to reject the maneuver. And this is also an important one, because the second yellow item here, the system shall not initiate the same maneuver again. What we have now in autopilot, and I know it's a very old stack right now and we shouldn't keep that into account, but I still do because that's what we are daily living with. If I approach an off-ramp and an on-ramp, the car actually asks me to move over another lane. And I think that's really weird because there's nobody there at that point. So I would be moving over, but then I can get fined for driving in the middle lane while I should be driving on the right. So there's a law here that you need to drive on the most right lane that is appropriate. I can see where it comes from, because if somebody comes from the on-ramp, then you're already in the next lane and the person has space to move onto the highway. But if there's nobody there, there's no reason to move over. So luckily we don't have the auto lane change doing that lane change for us. But yeah, this kind of says that it cannot initiate that again. So I cancel it after 5 seconds right now. It starts suggesting the same thing again. Here is an example that says, okay, I canceled it. You cannot suggest that same lane change again for a certain amount of time until you reach the next whatever, next kilometer, next off-ramp, something like that. Also, maneuver shall not be initiated if the system has presented an eyes-on request to the driver in the 7 seconds leading up to the initiation of the maneuver, which is also fine for me. That means you're not paying attention and the car wants to do a maneuver. In essence, it's not going to be a problem because it will suggest the maneuver. It's all notified like, hey, I want to do this, but I'm not going to initiate it. And then you look at the road and it will still do that after 7 seconds of attention span for you. So again, no problem with that part of the regulation. A cool thing that they've added now, and it's a strike through here. So the system shall only initiate a maneuver if the vehicle is located on a highway and it's not withholding HORs. That has been scrapped. So now, if the system is designed to perform system-initiated maneuvers on other roads than highways, it can do it according to the regulations that are being set, of course, but it can do it. It's not just limited to highways. So system-initiated maneuver, local roads, let's go. Yeah, awesome. Best part of the whole DCAS Phase 3 document is this part, just not being restricted to system-initiated maneuvers on highways only. Now we need to talk about driver-initiated lane changes as well. So the lane change procedure is only performed into or via a lane where the target lane is not designated for oncoming traffic. So the situation that we have in Belgium, and I think other European roads as well, is that a lot of them are dual carriage roads, I think they're called. It's one direction, the other direction, just a single lane for each direction. So that means that the system is not going to be allowed for a driver-initiated maneuver for a lane change to pass another vehicle when you are in this specific situation. So this is what we currently have as well, but on local roads we can't do anything in any circumstance. So it's not that big of a change that we are getting. The system shall only be permitted to perform a lane change on roads with pedestrians and cyclists if the system is able to avoid causing risk of a collision with any vulnerable road user. Of course, this is just only natural to me, but they have to put it in here because they need to cover their asses. Also, the 7 seconds of the initiation. So right now it's 5 seconds. So if you do a driver initiated maneuver, you turn on the blinker or with the push of the button, depending which car you have right now. You have 5 seconds to dive into the gap to start the initial maneuver and to cross with your front left tire the lane marking of the next lane. That's how the system currently works and what the limitations are. So that is being extended to 7 seconds, but then it's allowed to be extended beyond those 7 seconds without a time limit. This is really important. There is no time limit anymore on the lane change if it is allowed by national laws. So I would need to look up if there are any national laws, but that means that you're driving with the blinker on in the same lane for an extended period of time, which is stupid if you're just going straight on. But in some cases, you turn on the blinker and you wait for the person behind you to leave a gap that is large enough to allow you to move in. You indicate your intention for more than 3 seconds, because otherwise it would auto-cancel right now. But here in this situation, you indicate your intention and you allow for some time to have a gap between your car and the car behind you to move in a safe way. So yeah, I'm all for that, and I think that is definitely a very good measure that they have adjusted. Other maneuvers also already present in DCAS Phase 2 is navigating roundabouts, navigating around an obstruction, safely passing an object, taking turns, and departing or arriving at a parked position. Now, having the system change to needing to have hands-on to, as I mentioned before, allowing your hands to be near the steering wheel, that allows for a perfect roundabout exit. Otherwise, if you're on and you need to follow, it just wouldn't work. You would interrupt the system and then you would have to take over. With the hands near the wheel, the steering wheel can just turn as much as it wants. Although I'm starting to question how that would work with the yoke, because the yoke is square and near is near the sides, near the bottom, top, whatever. So would have to see. I have a yoke on my car. As soon as I get it, I will definitely test it. The last one is departing or arriving at the parked position. So that is the button that we have, like Start FSD, that we see definitely in there. But also the stop and start in general in non-highway environments and in absence of a leading vehicle, so traffic lights, for example, where the car now follows a leading vehicle if it's green, but if it's green and you're all alone, you have to tap the accelerator to confirm that it's okay to go. Here it says, well, it can stop and start, or it can start again if the vehicle has not been stationary for more than 5 seconds. So I'm thinking stop sign, being able to drive on immediately. Or the driver is not detected to be visually disengaged. So if you're paying attention to the road, it can also go, but because if at least one of the following conditions is fulfilled, so it's one of them. The system has confirmed there is no risk of collision detected. Obviously, I think that needs to be an and not an or. And then, of course, the last one, the driver has confirmed the drive off, which is for me the button that we have to start FSD. Now, this is what we have as an update on the DCAS regulations. Good news, it is unofficially approved. We are waiting for the official approval in a few weeks when the public announcement comes. And then WP29, and from there we go to the next step, which is 6 months later, January 1st. But let's not forget the fact that first in February, we have the RDW decision. And the RDW decision is for the Netherlands only, but once the Netherlands has approved it, then it goes automatically to the European Commission, and the European Commission will most likely approve it, but they can still revoke it. But they will approve it, and then it goes for every country in Europe that it is allowed, and that is specifically for the current version of Tesla FSD. But in the meantime, between those 2 points, individual countries can decide to adopt the RDW decision and implement it locally, country per country as well. But that's a European thing, right? What we're talking about here, GRVA, UNECE, which goes beyond the EU and consists of about 67 countries, I think, in total. And that goes worldwide. So South Africa is part of it. Australia, they follow it, but they decided to do their own thing and not follow it as strict. The European Commission, or the EU, has actually decided to follow it really strictly, the regulation, and that's why we are stuck with it and there is no way around it. Again, also for the UK will follow the EU decision, most likely, even though they're not part of the EU anymore. So there you have it. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and click that subscribe button, and make sure you click that little bell icon so you don't miss out on any new videos. And for now, thank you for watching. See you guys in the next one. Bye bye.